Hello guys! In this tutorial I'd like to show you how to make custom checkboxes and radio buttons with CSS. You can download the exercise files for this lesson in the description of the video. So here we have a simple HTML file with some basic form setup. Also linked to it styles.css file and an AMG folder with a single SVG icon. Inside the styles.css file I have already added some basic styles, so we can concentrate only on the things that we're interested in. If I open the index.html file in the browser, here we can see a form element centered on the page, with a single checkbox and two radio buttons. Right now they have a default system look, and we'll try to make them more appealing. So let's get back to the code editor and open the styles.css file. Here we start to add styles right after the styles for custom inputs comment. The first thing I want to add is to set our form row class to position relative. We need to do that because we will use the CSS pseudo selectors with absolute positioning to make checkbox and radio buttons look nice. And I also want to add the user select none property to the form row label. Right now, if we start clicking on the text of the label, it highlights with a color. And I don't want this to happen. That's why we should use the user select none property. It would also be wise to add some vendor prefixes, because this property is not standard. Now we will save the file and click on the text one more time. It is no longer highlighted. Okay, let's start with the checkbox first. Return to the styles file and first add the class .formRow input type checkbox, which allows us to target the default checkboxes. Next, I make it disappear from the screen with the following properties. Width set to 0, height is also set to 0, position absolute, 0 from top, left minus 99 pixels, opacity to 0, and visibility is set to hidden. In modern browsers we can simply use the display none property instead to achieve the same result. But if you want to target some older browsers, then you need to reset the default checkbox appearance without using the display none property, because in that case it can stop working. Here I mainly speak about the Internet Explorer. So now we can check the result in the browser. Here we can see that the checkbox is no longer there. Let's return back to the code editor and draw the appearance of the unchecked checkbox. Here we will use the labels pseudo element selector. So we type .form row input type checkbox plus label before. The plus selector targets label that comes immediately after the input with the type of checkbox. To be precise, we target the labels before pseudo element. And then we can type styles for it. Content set to an empty string. Absolute positioning. 0 from the left side. Width of 30 pixels. The same for the height. Let's also set a border 1 pixel solid with a hex value of 9E1186 and a little bit of the border radius. Please draw attention to the fact that here we position it absolutely against our form row element. That is why we used the position relative on the form row. Let's save the changes and preview them in the browser. So here we can see the state of our checkbox when it is unchecked. If I click on it, nothing happens. That is because we haven't yet assigned the checked styles to our checkbox. Let's return back to the VS Code and use the following selector. Form row, input type checkbox, the checked pseudo selector, plus label before. So here we have a new checked selector added, which says that if the input with the type of checkbox has been checked, then target the labels before pseudo element by applying the following styles. And inside we add the background property. To which we assign the background color, the URL to the provided icon, position icon in the center, and set it to no repeat. Let's also set the size of the icon to 15 pixels. The styles are ready. Save the changes and preview them in the browser. If we now click on the checkbox or its label, it becomes filled with the color and the background icon. That is exactly what we wanted. The checkbox became completely custom. Let's get back to the VS Code and do the same for the radio buttons. As with the checkbox, first we need to hide the default input radio button with the following selector. Form row, input type radio, and assign the same properties. Let's check the changes in the browser. And the radio buttons are gone. Go back to the IDE. First withdraw the radio button in inactive state with the following selector. Form row, input type radio, plus label before. Then we assign the needed properties. Let's set the content to an empty string. Position absolute, 0 from the left side, width of 30 pixels, the same for the height, border radius to 50% to make it like a circle, and the border itself. It would be the outer circle. Let's save the changes and check them in the browser. So here we see the ready buttons in inactive state. Then we can return back to the editor. And this time target the after pseudo element, which would be the inner circle, with the following selector. Form row input type radio, plus label after. And here we add some styling. So the content is set to the empty string. Opacity to 0, visibility to hidden, position absolute, 17.5 pixels from the top, seven and 5 pixels from the left side, width of 15 pixels, the same for the height, set the background color, and the body radius property to make it like a circle. Finally, an optional border property. The after pseudo element would act as an inner circle, showing that the ready button is active. I have added the opacity and visibility properties here in order to hide the circle by default. Finally, we need to make it visible when the ready button becomes active. We can do it with the following selector. Form row, input type radio, the checked pseudo selector, plus label after. Here we tell the browser to apply styles to the labels after pseudo element when the input type radio element has been checked. And of course we make it visible by setting its opacity to 1 and visibility to visible. Let's preview the changes in the browser. And now our radio buttons have become totally custom and still work well. To sum up the tutorial, there are 3 main points in making custom checkboxes and radio buttons. The first step is to hide the default input elements from the screen. Then we target the labels before and after pseudo elements and change their appearance to what we want. Finally, we use the checked pseudo selector on the input element and apply new styles to the before and after pseudo elements in order to change their appearance when the input becomes checked. That's it. I hope this tutorial was useful to you. Have a good luck and see you next time.